Here. So hi everybody. I'm TJ. I work with election offices across the country on operations, resilience, and practical problem solving. To the folks on the to the folks on the East Coast like myself, thanks for spending your lunch hour with us. To everybody else, good morning. Over the past year, we've been doing a lot of work in the realm of artificial intelligence and elections. Lots of our conversations focus on the same thing. These tools seem like they may be helpful. These tools seem like they may be harmful. But as an election official, I'm not sure what's allowed, who decides what, or how to do this safely. So today we have an excellent panel where we're going to talk about basic guardrails and decision-making structures so that your office, as it experiments with AI, as it comes into contact with AI tools, you can do so in a responsible and safe way. We're going to use NIST's AI risk management framework to really ground this conversation. Leave with more of a clear starting point. With that, before I drone on and on, we're going to jump to introductions, and we're going to start with Derek Bowens, the Director of Elections in Durham County, North Carolina. Derek.
Thanks, TJ. So, as TJ stated, Derek Bowens, Elections Director with the Durham County Board of Elections. Also work in a capacity on the Board of Directors of the Election Center. So glad to be here, glad to talk about this very important topic and to give insight that I might have.
All right, we'll turn it over to Jared.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jared Marcotte. I'm the president of Turnout. Thanks, TJ, for having me on. Turnout is a consultancy that works at the intersection of policy and technology. We run the Rapid V program for verification and validation of software systems, and we also do process modeling and process analysis to help improve the efficiencies of process in a particular statutory environment. So nice to meet y'all.
Amazing, amazing. Mike.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, depending where you're from. Mike Moser. I am the founder of Moser Solutions, formerly with CISA's Election Security and Resilience team, and prior to that, was the Director of Election Security and Technology at the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And excited to be here with you all and such an esteemed panel. Thank you.
Awesome. Mike, I'm going to jump straight to you, and then I hope others will also get involved in this conversation. But the idea to use the National Institute of Standards and Technology's AI risk management framework, that's something that came from you. You and I have had conversations about this. So can you just give us an idea or tell us why it's important, or why NIST has decided that focusing on governance first is important?
So I would say that you actually see it in the structure of NIST's document. So not only is the National Institute of Standards and Technology important because um, they're really such a key asset to kind of lay the groundwork and frameworks for how to think about things like risk mitigation, data security, and other items to kind of build a baseline for organizations. But one of the really notable things that I think is important is they structure the document where governance is front and center, and it's one of the very first things they talk about. And before you get into anything, whether that is figuring out how to manage risk, how to kind of think about how you're approaching AI, or implementing it, you want to lay the foundation and kind of put together some principles up front to put repeatable processes in place so that you can make sure that how you're approaching it, how you implement it, how you monitor it, it's really grounded in a way that is aligning with either the organization's risk tolerance or that you're tapping into other resources within your organization to offer various perspectives so that when you go and actually maybe practice with it and experiment, for those that are much more mature in their use of AI, they kind of have some processes in place where um, they have very clear expectations and outlines, and it really just helps set the stage so that when you're ready to move forward with it or continue to move forward with it, you kind of have a team or elements in place to kind of foster that maturity and growth. So really it's just building a foundation so that you have the support going forward to have fun and maybe lift some of the burdens that election officials are facing out there with limited resources and not having a lot of time to tackle other tasks like communication or things like that because they're so busy preparing for the election.
Absolutely. Uh, Jared, can you speak, and I know that this touches on some of your other work in terms of standardization. Can you speak kind of to the risks of ad hoc adoption and not approaching these things thoughtfully?
Yeah, I think the nice thing about starting with the AI risk management framework that NIST put together is that it really builds on NIST's or risk management framework, sort of the original, the OG, and then the cybersecurity risk management framework. Um, it all gets back to basics. Any kind of shadow IT within an organization is dangerous, right? You're not sure what's happening, what's going in, what's going out, what's happening to the environment internally. Um, so you may have allowed folks to use a particular AI, but because of people feeling like their needs may not be met by that, or they're not sure how to use it, they may use another AI, frontier-based AI that's out there on the market. You're not sure what those policy controls are, and you may not be able to control the information that's going in and out of your environment. You don't know if that AI is being trained on the information they're being put in, or whether or not you may be, if you're an organization that's kind of outside the federal government and you're in the private sector, there could be intellectual property that's being leaked out of your organization. So any sort of controls that you can put in place to ensure that the people within your organization have the tools to meet their needs. It's just a good IT process in general. And I think it also goes to, they talk about it in the governance framework, which is you need to be able to have a non-judgmental way of to talk about AI use. And if it turns out that something isn't working for folks, they should have the ability to be able to come to you and talk about their needs. And maybe the AI that you've decided to select for your organization doesn't really meet their needs, and you need to go out and figure out how to procure something else that helps operationally within the environment.
Excellent. Derek, let's bring it. We've talked about frameworks, we've talked about standards, we've talked about this stuff. I mean, it's great. I think these are excellent ways to, frame, stealing the first part of that word, frame these conversations. But when it comes to being the actual election administrator or election official responsible in a jurisdiction, what do all of these things actually mean to you day to day?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, most, and I shouldn't say most, or I'll be relative to North Carolina. Here, we don't typically have, network segmentation. So we're under the county's umbrella of information technology support. Of course, we do things independent of our IT department functionally, but we really depend on them for security and, data privacy policy, et cetera. So right now, we're actually participating. Our county has developed an AI governance council of sorts to discuss a lot of the framework discussions that Mike and Jared have brought up, and also these NIST standards, which I'll be sure to share with our IT director. So having those conversations with them are very, very critical. But in the interim, as we build out this policy enterprise-wide, we've been using it internally. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I initially was an AI denier. And I've said this to you before, TJ. I was very, very skeptical about the use of AI and just thinking that it was taking away from the human element of executing something that is so core to our republic, which is the execution of elections. But when you start getting into complicated things, you're like, man, I wish I could have something that would take a look at this to make sure I'm not missing anything, or maybe there's some other relevant federal or state statutes that could be referenced in this policy. It has a lot of value. So one of the practical things that we've done as we develop policy enterprise wide in our county is anytime a staff person in this office wants to use our paid AI account to get information, there's actually an approval workflow. So what are you putting in the engine? What are you asking? And depending on what you're asking, I have to take that and assess it against state law. All right. So there's provisions under Chapter 132 of North Carolina General Statutes where I cannot provide any technical information about systems that we use to manage elections or systems in general associated with IT and security infrastructure. So if I get a request and it's giving away a detail specific to how a system uses, I have to deny that request because it would violate North Carolina law. So right now we have a really good workflow internally for the use of AI until we get that kind of general policy in place to apply functionally across the board.
Derek, can you talk a little bit about the council that you all have convened, or the working group that you've convened, and who is on that working group? It sounds like you're on that working group, but really kind of outside of the IT realm, who are the movers and shakers there?
So in our county, the IT director, who is a huge fan of AI, he calls our version internally Alexis, named after his daughter, I believe. So right now it's mostly department heads that are on the council, and then of course individuals that are really involved in the tech space that may not be directors of departments, such as data science individuals, chief data architects, et cetera, folks that do developing for the county. So mostly department heads, but it includes some of those kind of SMEs with respect to software development and data privacy.
Excellent. Jared or Mike, can you all talk? Obviously, AI, or AI in all of its forms, is not the first new technology to be introduced to government. It's not the first new technology to be introduced to elections. Kind of drawing on both of your experiences, what works when you talk about setting up those types of groups? What would you avoid? What would you try to see more of? Either one of you.
I can go first, or Mike.
Don't fight over it. That's all I ask.
Jared, you
Okay.
started. Go for it, man.
All right, I did start. Okay. No, I think honestly, just listening to what Derek's talking about, I think what the important thing is that it's a large multidisciplinary group from all levels of the organization, because AI will eventually touch everyone. And I think it's important to, going back to just the risk equation, in the beginning is essentially figuring out as many different viewpoints as you can get into the problem or into the problem space. You can figure out what the risk really is and how much it affects, right? Because when you go back to risk, it really is just what is the likelihood of a thing happening, and to what degree will that thing happen? And we're not just talking about negative risks, we're also talking about positive benefits. So if you can maximize those while reducing all of the negatives, that's really the success of the group. So the more opinions and observations you can get, the more buy-in you'll get in the end. I will also say that through all of these processes, the biggest thing is making sure that senior management is involved at all levels of the organization. I think it's probably best if it's a bottom-up developed and top-down implemented process, so that everything kind of meets in the middle and you make sure you have buy-in across the entire org.
Yeah, and I think that's well stated on both fronts. And I think one thing that, if there's anything I want to impart with folks here, is just start small and just be thoughtful about how you're approaching it. You don't have to rush into it, um, but knowing what you're attempting to accomplish with it makes a big difference. Often, one of the first things that folks want to jump into when I'm out talking to people is kind of like, oh, what tool should I use? Well, the use case is going to drive what tool you're going to use. Well, most of us are really accustomed, as of late, of AI is the exposures to Gen AI, generative AI, where it can develop content for you. But AI in itself has been around for quite some time. It's really with the explosion of and proliferation of commercial tools over the last few years that has really put this front and center in most people's minds. So it's not a new technology, really. It's been around. So there's ways to approach it and test it thoughtfully and balance some of those risks that Jared was talking about while also realizing the benefits behind it. But the other thing I would like to touch on just real briefly too is how what Derek was referencing, how they're approaching it, which is fantastic, by putting together a work group and kind of getting those various perspectives involved. We might traditionally say this is an IT thing. Well, in reality, it's not. And IT is going to be heavily invested in the process, and they're going to have really good feedback and considerations for you and how to secure the technology environment. But you're going to need to get legal involved. You're going to need to have your subject matter experts there because you want to make sure that the output is right and you're not, you're reviewing what's being put together. So this might sound like a lot though when if you haven't really approached this, just start small, and realize it doesn't have to be an overly bureaucratic process. Might sound like it is, but in reality, you can mold this to your own process internally. And for some of your smaller jurisdictions, this might be one person that is your point person to help coordinate all this. Whereas your larger jurisdictions, they might be able to have a work group or something like that. So you might hear some of that today, but you can mold this to your process and be able to put structure in place, that governance, so you have those repeatable things to go through, make sure you're balancing the risks and benefits and being able to implement it in a way that is really beneficial to your staff and team.
Absolutely. Derek, I don't know if you have anything to respond to. I mean, I think many folks in the election sphere look to Durham County as a shining example of how to do elections well. Do you have any advice to your colleagues, perhaps in smaller jurisdictions, on not how to do this less well, but how to do it at a smaller scale?
Yeah, I mean, I think having standards, of course. I mean, I couldn't agree with Mike and Jared more as to how you use AI, even in smaller jurisdictions that may not be as resource heavy. You really do need to use resources to the extent your law allows, to govern use. But I mean, the free version of ChatGPT did us a great bit of service initially when we were exploring potentially using it. Our county is really big on utilizing Copilot. We're not as big of fans of Copilot, but the governance is so much is kind of being structured around the use of that tool as the county is really invested there. But once you kind of get parameters on what you can and cannot do, I think that's very important. Many of you election officials know what your rules are. You know what you can disclose, what you can't disclose, what is fine to be subject to public disclosure. That's another thing that we think about quite a bit. So if our training manual, if we want to vet that through our advanced chat GPT account, then we take out things that we know would not be releasable publicly, for fear that it could be, right? We don't know all of the deep inner and outer functions of AI, right? We know a lot, but it's a powerful beast, for lack of a better word. And so, really knowing what you can and cannot put into a system that would produce results, is very important. So I would say that's a baseline, and the resources mentioned, by Jared and Mike, I think go a long way in assisting with that. But a lot of it will be jurisdiction specific, especially if you don't have a large IT infrastructure, if you don't have that security support. really have a handle on what it is you can disclose. And I think that would be a great way to drive what you opt to use it for at a base level.
Excellent, excellent. Mike, I'm looking back at you. I know you're part of a new effort as a contractor, the Election Security Exchange. I know that the exchange recently put out a resource, AI in Elections, Essentials for Risk Management. I think we've touched on a lot of these items, and we've even touched on the one that I'm gonna focus in on. But in here, the document has verify, 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 you're in charge. Can you talk about, and Derek and Jared as well, can you talk about what you're in charge means operationally? Is it being able to look back at how the tool was used, being able to have an understanding similar to how Derek does in Durham of how people are planning to use the tool? Just generally, what does it mean to be in charge, Mike? I've never been in charge of anything.
You seem to be in charge. Are you sure about that? No, I think that's a wonderful question, and I very much appreciate the plug on the product and the organization. We are relatively new, just launched, I guess about a month ago at this point, but we're just really focused on election security and being kind of a trusted hub of information and education. But in that particular item, it's really about verifying the output. And of course, this depends on how you're using and what type of technology you're using. But um, AI is really it's really a tool. It's not the final decision maker. And so it's just an opportunity for you to remember that no matter how you're using it, you want to make sure that there is a human looped into the process. And this really supports too, not just from a risk mitigation standpoint, but this supports best practices in elections and supports the nature of like the bipartisan review teams. This is along those lines where somebody is there taking a look at the information and saying, yes, this is accurate, this is correct, where AI is never the final decision maker. The human is the final decision maker to make sure that um, the output is accurate and it's not going to mislead anyone. I mean, while the technology has been around for a bit, um, sort of still in its infancy in some stages. Like there's a lot of growth in this area, and it can make mistakes. It's based on a lot of calculations and mathematical models, and that can make mistakes. You're sorting through tons of data. Things could be categorized wrong. And so you want to be able to limit that risk and making sure that there's always someone looking at the output. I mean, you can do a lot of testing up front, and as you're implementing the tool, and you can check all the boxes and everything is accurate. But particularly if you're using a commercial tool, they might tweak something, and they're going to tweak something. It's a product they are selling. And so just one small change on their side can change the output where something previously was accurate might now be wrong in how it's inferring and referencing data. And so it's always good to build a verification step in, not only throughout the process, but definitely at the end before you put something in the public domain or use it to make a decision internally. Someone has now vetted that for accuracy before you actually make a formal decision.
Derek, Jared, anything there?
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. I would say from a functional perspective, there was something we were trying to implement a project where to effectuate our continuity of operations plan, where if one precinct had a situation where they had to be transferred to another adjacent precinct, we wanted to use AI to tell us which precincts had comparable jurisdiction so that we would know what precincts had what ballot styles to inform the transfer. And so we dropped all this data into ChatGPT, again, things that would be disclosable under our law. And it pushed us back out a nice table with, the adjacencies and the connections between the various precincts. And it had some wrong data in it. And staff was prepared to just use it based on, and of course, there's workflows, so that would never happen by default. But staff was prepared to just drop it in our tool that we use for emergency management and apply it. So I agree 100% with Mike. There always has to be a human verification piece to anything, even if it's minute, that you're getting from AI. And that was a huge thing that kind of stopped me from using it initially was I don't like the fact that there isn't a human element, but then I came to the conclusion, wait, I'm the human element. So I need to be very versed and an expert in the things that I am using it for so that I can vet the information that I'm getting from the system. So couldn't agree more with what Mike said.
Jared, anything
Yeah,
there?
I'll add a little bit of color commentary, which is it reminds me of an old presentation from IBM that came out in the 70s, basically saying that a computer cannot make management decisions because a computer cannot be held responsible. I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Stephen Hunt at National Association of State Chief Administrators Conference last year. And he also mentioned that during his presentation, he said that AI can't have empathy. It can pretend that it does, it can seem like it does, but it can't. So it also really, really wants to please. So it's willing to provide you with information that it thinks you want. And in going to those lengths, kind of like Derek mentioned, it can sometimes make things up, right? There's AI hallucinations. That's a real thing. If you ask it to cite its sources, it will give you some very real looking URLs that it said that it found information on. And, you go and test out those URLs and none of those stories ever existed or none of those resources ever existed. So you need to be very, very careful thinking about both the inputs and the outputs that you give it, especially on the outputs and making sure that there is that human who is accountable and is thinking about the impact of the decisions that are being made in what you're actually trying to do.
I imagine that IBM presentation took place very early in your computer science career, if it was in the 1970s.
I was not a part of that presentation.
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk. Derek talked. I really love specific examples. I think that's what people makes it real for folks, right? So, Derek, you mentioned kind of using an AI tool for precinct resourcing, and how that was envisioned to be helpful, but kind of went off the rails of helpfulness. The way that I, again, not knowing anything about anything, the way I divide the work in an elections office, or at least the technology in an elections office, you have your tabulation technology, you have your non-tabulation voting technology, and then you've got all the other technology that you have because you're a 21st century office worker. You've got your email, you've got your Word, your PowerPoint, whatever else it might be. I am personally of the belief, here still at the beginning of our journey into AI, that for election offices, there is plenty of stuff in that third realm of, I gotta do better about communicating. I can write crisper emails. I can organize my spreadsheets better, on and on and on. That I don't think we ever get to the point, fingers crossed, where we even really contemplate those two other realms. Can you talk generally, anybody, about some areas within that third realm of, I'm an office worker, I'm overburdened, I've got too much going on, I want to take some time off, whatever it might be, where AI tools have been helpful or could be envisioned to be helpful?
I can jump in with one real quick. I think the biggest benefit for me, which I spend a lot of time on as director, in addition to all the other responsibilities that come with that title, I consider myself a lowly one, but nonetheless one, is code. I spend a lot of time, developing custom databases and also building tools in Airtable. I always have to do a plug for Airtable, using their custom scripting feature. And so when I get hit a snag, I just drop a question to Chat GPT or our advanced version. These are the requirements. This is what I'm trying to do. Can you drop me some code? And it handles 90% of it. I may have to do a little bit of cleanup because it didn't totally understand my question. Sometimes my fault, sometimes chat doesn't interpret correctly. But I would say for me, the biggest kind of wow, I can breathe and I don't have to spend as much time trying to research how to build this tool to enhance operational efficiency is using it for code development. That might be in alignment with your question, TJ. If not, let me know. But there's a number of additional things. Development of media kits, the development of our annual reports, policies. I mean, we've used IT or not IT, Chat GPT for several policy reviews. Fine tune the language here. Use this particular reference. And to your point, Jared, you made a comment earlier about links that or an AI system may give you or tool may give you. One of the things we'll do if it comes back with a link for us to utilize as a resource or to vet the information provided, is we drop that into a malicious analysis tool. Regardless, even if we think that the domain is one that is secure and we trust it, we're still going to drop it over there just to make sure there is no malicious code behind that link. So I think that was a really good point to make. But generally, TJ, um, beyond kind of the baseline stuff, it has significantly expanded operational efficiency in terms of giving us things that would take a significant time to develop. Vetting something that ChatGPT puts together is way more efficient and time saving than us doing it fully and then asking Chat to take a look. So it's been incredibly beneficial from an efficiency standpoint.
Jared or Mike, anything there? I will say, I think we've been using the umbrella term AI, and I'm always careful to come back. I think in most instances, what we're referring to is the relatively new introduction of generative AI. So, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, those types of things. I do want to drop that point because I think it's an important one. Jared and Mike, who are much better at computers than I am, can explain why AI has been around for a long, long time, but perhaps what we're seeing now is a little different. But just wanted to clear that up. Jared, anything going back to the point about possible uses, possible areas?
Like you mentioned, AI covers a lot of ground. You can talk about machine learning. You can talk about AI use within network monitoring. It goes a lot further than just generative pre-trained transformers. So, definitely when it comes to uses within offices, the sky is the limit. But again, it goes back to what is your governance plan? What is your feeling of safety and security around that? And what is your risk tolerance?
Mike?
And I'd say this is actually a really good plug for your top production in the background there with go to the Substack. If you're not already signed up, definitely recommend you to sign up for that. Because one of the things I like about the ASU AI and Elections Clinic effort is they're really cultivating a community of practice where people can share their ways they're using it, ask questions, bounce ideas off each other. And a lot of the stuff we're seeing there is a lot of the things that Derek has mentioned, where people are kind of tackling, especially as they're getting accustomed to it and getting educated on how to use the tools, they're using a lot of those uh, methods in the office of responding to email, maybe taking a first attempt at looking at an election calendar and turning it into a social media calendar with information, and it's getting augmented with other background details. One of the actually funner ideas, in my opinion, because I like tabletop exercises. I know not everyone does. But there was a group that actually used one of the tool sets to build like a dice game for tabletop exercises. And, you can prompt a dice roll and it'll throw an inject at you and you can react to it. That was actually really creative. But I would also say that for those that are just getting their feet wet, when it comes to AI and getting exposed to it for the first time, it's already in elections. When you look at your vote shields of the world and ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center, they use machine learning to connect data together and check for and to support list maintenance and things of that nature, and to glean statistics on public-facing voter data. And so it's already out there. Even signature comparison, to some extent, it's using AI. Now, there's always a person involved with that to verify the outcome of that comparison. But it's already in election processes today in a more granular level than some of those frontline tasks. But I think what we're starting to see now is as people are uh, maturing in the use of AI, they're starting to go beyond those quick wins and responding to email, augmenting communication plans, because not everyone might have a public information officer. We're now starting to see, I would say, like the intermediary stages or um, kind of like I know some people kind of frame it in like a red, yellow, red, or sorry, green, yellow, red color pattern where like green is easy concepts. I think the Substack has even portrayed this where like summarizing a document, summarizing a new legislation, where it could quickly summarize that. Those are easy things in the public domain. You don't have to necessarily be too concerned about what's being ingested. But when you start getting into the yellow phase, now you're digging into translating content and drafting voter-facing communications, where you definitely want to have checks and balances in place to make sure the wrong thing wasn't stated. Um, and I still think we have some growing to do to get into the kind of the red or be very cautious phase um, where you're analyzing internal voter data potentially. I don't think there's a lot of people that are in that route yet, because we're still kind of getting acclimated to what the right safeguards that should be in place. And or like for public facing chatbots, there are some jurisdictions that do that, and and how they've configured that matters. But it's certainly not anything that's autonomous where it's just kind of reacting without anybody checking behind the scenes. So there's definitely maturity that's occurring in this sector. But I think people should continue to use their imagination and then work with their teams to make sure they have the right boundaries in place, that they're not exposing anything unnecessarily or providing the tool set with something that might be able to infer something about a person.
Excellent, excellent. We have a very lively Q&A. We will have one more set of questions, and then jump into the Q&A. When we talk about evaluating tools, Jared, I know that this is something that your company does, you do individually. What are some of the questions, and I think Derek and Mike, through your experiences as well, you've got tons of experience here. What are some of the questions that folks should be asking vendors? I think AI integration or AI tool integration is everywhere. We know that, we see that, we live that. So if I'm talking to someone who's trying to sell me something and they say, oh, tool X has AI integrated into it, how do I thoughtfully judge what that even means and what it means to me in my context?
It's really hard for me to talk around this without coming down to a bit of a sales pitch, but you need to have a validation and verification process on the tools you're bringing into your environment. I just think that is the first step, because you really don't know how an organization is. Let me step back a second. Going back to Derek's very thoughtful example of how they're working on how to use AI within their organization, and talking about how the NIST AI risk management framework sets up how AI actors, the folks that actually develop AI should be developing their AI systems and services. Like this is all very thoughtful and good. Now, if you're going out to procure a service, do you know that they're following those same steps? I would say probably right off the bat, no. So you need something that actually will go in and look at the organization, look at their development environment, and be able to provide some insights on that. I wrote an article a little while ago on our website talking about how we're approaching this new realm of AI, not only about AI being developed into projects, or products that you're actually planning to procure, which we do have tools to introspect the product itself and try to figure out if AI has been integrated into it. But we're also talking about AI in the whole development life cycle. From an organization, did you develop this project using AI in some way? Did you have a policy around the use of AI in development? Are there any restrictions on which AIs can be used? And what is the scope of AI usage? How many people are using it? Is there experimentations outside of the policy? Are they allowed? Are they not allowed? And unless you really have the answer to those questions and you have a better sense of what you're bringing into your environment or what you're actually having your people use, you can have a very, very good, solid system in place for how you approach the use of AI, but then you bring something internally into your environment that was developed without that in place. So this is where I say you need to be a bit careful on what you're looking at, how you're looking at it, and a lot of the frontier AIs have some security controls in place. Where I do add a little bit of caution to this is we don't really know what's going on in the back end. So from the trustworthiness of the AI, which the risk management framework talks about, accountable and transparent seems to be the one thing that's missing with all the frontier AI that's out there. You may have some policy or legal agreements or terms of use that you can actually review, but in terms of exactly what's going on behind the scenes, it's hard to know what's going on. And so having a procurement process, having a verification validation process in place, yes, like RabbitB, will really help you understand how that organization actually views the use of AI, whether or not it's worked into the product, and then how your data will be used once it goes in there.
Excellent.
And
Mike,
TJ, I just asked Jared. I'm just
Yeah,
kidding, but
there we go.
But seriously, they're a great resource. I think this is a really good opportunity to really set the distinction. While this is talking about AI, sometimes it can be like this scary thing, which sometimes it does make some scary outputs where you're like, wow, that is really cool and also quite scary. But there's no matter what you're doing, at the end of the day, this is a form of technology. There are evergreen technology principles that are still in place, and there's going to be AI specific things people should be thinking through. So asking the vendor things like what kind of cybersecurity protections in place? How do you manage the data? Where is the data going? Who owns the data? Stuff like that. Those are evergreen technology questions that should be asked, and that'll help give you some insight, just what their general practices are like. But then there's going to be also some more AI specific questions that you're going to want to engage the vendor, and these are more poking around transparency and privacy. Um, uh, like, is your data going to be used to improve their product? Like, what types of training data do they use to develop the product? Because that's going to potentially well, it will influence the outputs. And then you're going to want to get a sense of is there a certain degree of explainability to the product? And And really that's getting at, can they trace the algorithmic decision-making process of whatever the tool is? And if the vendor can't clearly articulate how data is managed, where it's coming from, what data they're using, how it gets to that endpoint clearly and transparently, that's going to start raising some flags from my perspective. You're going to want someone that can easily trace and even segment your data if it needs to, so that if you ever need to pull out of that contract, or if you need to silo your data to some extent, they should be able to explain from ingestion to the output where your data is going in their system. And if they can't clearly talk about those items, then I would definitely be a little concerned and poke further. And I would also look and ask questions like how they're monitoring data throughout, or the process throughout the life cycle. Because as we mentioned earlier, um, things can change and outputs can change where it's no longer accurate, and they need to be able to monitor the health and safety of the system and give you confidence in what you're using is a reliable product.
Excellent, excellent. I just put two links in the chat. One is from my colleague Trevor, who wrote about government specific AI tools and some of those that are available to folks in government. Derek, I'm going to give you the opportunity to save your voice, because it looks like you're the most popular person in the Q&A. Jared and Mike, you guys could almost just go away now. Everybody wants to talk to Derek. But we invite you to
Same team.
in any way that you can. All right, we're going to start with a long one. I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. Please don't be mad at me, the person I'm paraphrasing for. In elections, we don't adopt technology simply because it's new. We adopt it we adopt it when it is secure, auditable, and transparently resilient in our regulated environment. AI is no different. What does the panel see as and they remark too that they don't think that AI or any of the available AI tools are any of those three things quite yet. So what does the panel see as any data-driven or evidence-driven proof that may alleviate some of those concerns surrounding AI inclusion in the elections domain? This one's not specifically for Derek. Derek, you're welcome to jump in, but we'll get to your questions after this one.
Well, I'll just generally say, and very quickly, and it goes back to the previous discussion. For us, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in AI governance or how it should be used. What I'm going to do, and I think most jurisdictions would have access to this resource either in-house or some type of managed service, I'm going to defer to the experts. So when I want to utilize an AI tool or some form of a tool for ingestion, what I'm going to do is talk to my CISO, my Chief Information Security Officer, and ascertain what best practices would be. If I'm going to contract with someone, or if I see that AI option pop up in a software package, which is just about everything you buy now, we're going to go through proper workflow. And that's going to include our IT department. That's going to include the experts who can ask the questions about where the data is going, where it's hosted, who controls the data, et cetera. And those responses will govern whether we move forward contractually with a service. But then there's the other tier of finance, right? They've got a piece to play, a part of the process. So, are the financials correct? Does this align with how we expect, to receive certain services and payments and et cetera? So there's a huge workflow that would have to be followed in our county before we proceed with anything that could be used to take data that we have, public or not. It's a very extensive process. So I think if you have those controls, if you have institutional support, I talk a lot about all the time when asked, like, where do you get all these tools? You must have all this money. No, what we have is enterprise-wide solutions that we ask, hey, can we use that too? And there's no significant cost to allow us to utilize those tools. And it's already been vetted because the county, right, is using it, and they're in a lot of respects a lot more restrictive than we are as an independent entity in North Carolina in determining what tools we use and how we use them. So get with the experts. If you don't have, an in-house IT department, you have a managed service, or you great resources dropped in the chat. If your jurisdiction allows those types of in-kind contributions to help inform elections, I would definitely advocate for that 100% before you engage in anything, even the simplest of tools.
Jared or Mike, maybe we don't want to spend too much time on this one, but anything to add?
I think honestly, Derek covered it, especially when it comes to offices. There probably are very thoughtful procedures in place for deciding whether or not to use something new, and trust the people that you have to do the due diligence before you use it. I will say if you're looking for AI for system or process optimization in some way, there are also other less AI related things that you can use, like, and again, to put another sales plug in here, but like, process modeling, process analysis, process improvement. It's just figuring out what you do, what you should be doing within your current statutory environment, and figuring out if you can optimize from there. Just basically alleviate any bottlenecks. It's more low level, but also kind of uses the same sort of consensus building exercise, and everyone has a better idea of like what everyone's doing.
And I would just add super fast that this is why governance matters. And it doesn't need to be this big unknown thing. I mean, really just build that foundation, define what you can and can't do with it, and then build a support structure where, to what Derek was referencing, he has a whole support structure here where people are helping to vet the use case and the outcome and the controls that are in place to protect the systems and data. So build that foundation first, and then that'll help you inform what your risk tolerance is and how you might use tools down the line.
All right. Here's a question specifically for Derek. The person says, I am very cautious with AI, but my staff is generally not. We do not have any guidance, and our cyber or IT department is expecting that no one will use it. This is one of our favorite examples that we talk about often. This person says, currently our staff will use it on their own devices and use the output daily. Derek, looking at you, I don't know if prior to your current workflow, how were you navigating those issues? What did that look like? Was this something that you were, sufficiently early to some of these conversations that you were able to kind of serve as a guide? But generally, where's your head on this?
So I would say initially I made it clear that no one is to use any AI tool unauthorized on Durham County's network. So if you're utilizing Durham County's computers, network, tools, you cannot use AI until we get some form of governance in place as to how we're going to use it internally. Now that we allow the use of that, we have one managed account for the tool that we use. And so I can see any input anybody puts in the tool. And of course, we go through the workflow of getting the approval before it's entered into the tool to get what we need. But I would say ban the use of going to, if you're using chatgpt.com and allowing folks to use it without logging into an account that is established for the department. So you can at least have the control of seeing what is being inputted into the system if you don't want to go to the extreme of having every staff person submit to you what they plan to enter. For me, as the department head, it's my job to have general knowledge of the election laws of North Carolina and what can and cannot go in. So I'm best suited to respond to something staff, which is in a specific division or area, may not know as pertains to the law and how it applies to the use of that tool with respect to that law. So I would say if everyone wants to use it, I think a baseline would be, hey, everybody has to be using the same account. And I would add the piece that, it needs to be vetted through someone before it can be used. And I need to have visibility on it. So I think at the lowest level for us, that was where we started. Prior to that, it was a ban on it altogether. And now, of course, the county is developing general governance and generative AI policies to govern how everyone utilizes these tools.
Jared, Mike, anything here?
It hurts my soul. I mean, bottom line is you need a policy, um, and to prevent things like this.
And
Uh, Using personal devices and non-organizational assets like this just it doesn't help anyone. It just exposes the organization to more risk and security failures. And so, either your organization is going to use it or not going to use it. You need a policy, and the policy might be we're not using it right now, and that's okay. But we also, though, need to get buy-in from leadership because the reality of the current environment, particularly in elections, people need resources and they need to augment their capacity because elections has limited capacity and often, depending on where you're at, you don't have all the resources that you need. And so saying no might not be a reflection of what your staff needs. And so you might need to have a conversation with leadership and explain to them, and particularly IT and senior leaders, why a policy and why pursuing this is helpful. But that policy is sort of like a safety blanket, and it's a safety tool, and it also limits risk to the organization while hopefully benefiting the positive uses behind it. So never use your personal device. Just plug in that up front and, have that conversation and get a policy in place.
Yeah, and I'll step out of my moderator role a little bit and say that I remember my first day working for the county government. I got my little badge. I went to the HR office. I sat through the presentation. You want the 401k or you want the pension? You want this? You want that? Whatever it might be. And I also signed a computer use policy. I did not read the entire computer use policy. I do not remember anything about it other than the fact that I said I agree that I will use the tools that are given to me. So using a personal device is more than likely already outside of uh, that existing policy. And I think it's important to layer the fact that, again, these tools are new in many ways, but the kind of bones of them don't necessarily have to operate outside of what's already existing in terms of governance. All right, we have spent way too much time on way too few questions. I'm sorry to a bunch of folks in advance that we're not going to get to you. Jared, did you have something? Sorry.
I just I saw one in the corner of my eye that I just wanted to speak to real quick, which is any guidance on broadly sharing elections management software code base with AI systems for help with coding. TJ shaking his head is pretty much where I come out on that too. A number of things. One, don't start with a brownfield environment, which is very different from a greenfield environment where you're starting from nothing. AI is typically not good with pre-existing code bases. But also, if you do not own that code base, which is another issue, you could be getting yourself into a huge liability on doing that. So just broadly, no.
I like that. That is a good note. Now that we're in our final 30 seconds, I will share, if our panelists allow me to, their contact information in a follow-up note to anybody who has been on with us. Thank you to Jared, Derek, and Mike for joining us. This session has been recorded. We'll be posting it. We're going to continue this conversation using that risk management framework. Join us in a few weeks for the second installment in this. If you've got any questions, always feel free to reach out. We're happy to talk through anything. To all of the election officials and folks who support election officials joining us today, thanks for the work you do, and we'll see you next time. See y'all later.
Thanks, everybody.